because one thing that got me started on all of this, like I said earlier in the show, was the fact that there's no parallax shift of constellations. And
Yeah,
if there were, wouldn't that be a really faulty system to navigate by when you're out at sea?
good
Like if
point.
constellations were just like going all over the place, how were people using that for thousands of years to very accurately navigate and circumnavigate from, continent to continent? How are
You're
they
right.
able to do
Oh
that?
yeah.
You're right. If the stars were moving in parallax, yeah, you're absolutely right because that adds a whole. I mean, multiple orders of magnitude in terms of complexity. Your older civilization or your older societies wouldn't have been able to do it, not on their own. It would have driven them mad. They would have spent all their days working with the math, and they never would have figured it out.
Yep,
If it
they
was
would have
that.
been more concerned with, okay, well, how much do we have to account for now since we're 6 months on the other side of the sun?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It makes it way more difficult. So you're right. So and that confirms what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. And I don't want to let I want to make sure people don't forget. As soon as you get that rendered and I can process it on my side, I am going to upload a test that you did where you basically rigged up kind of a makeshift a gun barrel and pointed it at the Polaris, right?
Yes.
And then set a time lapse. Here's dedication, folks, as far as testing goes, and set up a time lapse with a camera. And a couple frames a day, pretty much, or how
I would let it run all throughout the night, and I would come get it the next morning.
really? How
Yes.
I mean, how long? Seriously? So you were how many? So that's 5.5 months times what? 8 hours a night?
But it is time lapse, though.
Oh, okay.
It's sped up. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, so you did that for 5.5 months, and you're saying Polaris didn't move. And I know the excuse the astronomers and astrophysicists are going to come out and say, well, because it's so far away, we wouldn't be able to detect it. But that should not really be the case. Not if we're spinning around the sun, and that sun is also moving through space with the entire solar system.
And that's my biggest point. If anyone doesn't understand what we're talking about right now, let me just make this layman for you.
Okay.
If we are pointing on, what is it, a 33.3 degree axis, roughly?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
If we are pointed towards the Polaris star and we're orbiting, you have to take into consideration that by the time we get on the other side of the sun, our North Pole does not shift in a sense of, oh, let me flip all the way back over and point at the star again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I did it for 5.5 months. My apparatus on my roof didn't move. Right?
Yeah.
It stayed pointing at it. So as we're traveling around the sun, how all of a sudden wasn't it like 180 degrees off and like on the other side of the sky whenever I went and looked out?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And you never see that. And that's the biggest thing for me is like, well, if we're truly orbiting 350 million miles, eventually our axis will be pointing away from the Polaris star.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen.
Wow.